Hey there YouTube, welcome back to Artichoke Dip. My name is Rob, solo tabletop gamer. And whether you can believe it or not folks, here we are in the home stretch of 2018. Getting ready to say goodbye to 18 and hello to 2019. And I have to admit, it's not a bad thing. Matter of fact, 2018's been a pretty good year for me. With all the support from all you guys, all the subscribers I have gained, all your comments, all of your suggestions for games have really opened up my eyes as well. And I have now tried games that I guess I would have never thought of before. Because before I started this channel, I loved Palladium Fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, and the old school role-playing games, and it was up to you guys that said, hey, have you ever tried this, have you ever tried that? And that's what I did. I started purchasing games, trying them out, reviewing them, and here I am. And I have to admit, from the bottom of my heart, guys, thank you so much. So, 2018, we're getting ready to say goodbye, and I think in this video, I'm going to talk about, over this year, I've had like I'm going to say really it's my first full year of actually having a lot of activity with this channel and doing a lot more with gaming and changing my aspect on solo gaming and how to present it to you guys and what's really the best out there to buy to bring to your tables to be used for solo RPG gaming. So before we get into this video, got a couple of disclaimers to get out of the way first. First one is, this is all my hard-earned money. I am not endorsing anybody, and nobody is endorsing me to tell you this is the best game since the invention of toilet paper. Which leaves me the ability to be extremely brutally honest and tell you, you know, this game really, really sucks. Or, you know, this game's worth buying. And so I like that. I like having that ability to be able to be that brutally honest with you guys. Two, my other disclaimer, if you like my channel, click the like button or hit the subscription button. Click that little bell icon depending on the device you're using, cell phone, computer, tablet, smoke signals, ESP. You'll get a notification. Pretty sure. Maybe. Anyways, let's move on and let's talk about this. I'm going to do a list of what I have picked up in the year of 2018 that have really added to my tabletop experience, and maybe it'll help with you guys. And we're going to talk about board games and we're going to talk about RPGs. So let's jump into, at this point, my number. Should we go to number one? Let's go to number 5. Then we'll count down to number 1. So number 5, this is one that I picked up, and it's called Dungeons for the Masters. Now, for those of you out there that enjoy old school dungeon crawling, and if you're like me, I used to really love to sit and draw out dungeons and use the graph paper. I could spend hours doing that, and then you know, at one point I noticed I enjoyed the story more than drawing the dungeons out on graph paper. So then it became kind of, at that point, I started to put the dungeon design on the back burner, and that necessarily wasn't a good thing. But when this book came about and I picked it up, and I highly recommend this, whether you're a dungeon master or whether you're a solo RPGer, this book right here gives you 100 pre-generated dungeons. You just open it up, you pull it out, and at that point, the only thing you have to do is stock the dungeon with what you want to stock it with, whether it be traps, monsters, you know, curses, enchantments. It's all up to you. But the cool thing that I like about this book is the fact that I can just flip to a page and say, this one, and 100% randomized. Now, with the book, you also, towards the back of the book, you get dungeon encounters. They give you random tables with it, along with other tables that would be used for a dungeon, and some of the items that you would find in there, traps or other items that may be cursed. So it really is a great supplement for your tabletop experience. And if you're like me and you like the tabletop setting to where you have vast areas of wilderness at that point and you have dungeons peppered across the landscape that you go and check out, that's where this book really comes in well, and that's why it's number 5 for the year of 2018 of the books that I have bought and have incorporated into my tabletop gaming. So let's get into number 4 of RPG Tabletop. This book is a must-have if you are a solo RPG enthusiast and you are looking to add more depth into your game. And this really approaches you with questions of stuff that you would never really honestly think about. Like, who built the dungeon? What was its purpose? What happened to make that dungeon become what it is today that your characters are in? And more questions other than that, and it really adds a lot more into your RPG, into the fabric of the story, and really helps pull everything together. And overall, it's just a great source of information to have for RPG. And now it doesn't cover just dungeons, it covers other aspects of gaming, storylines, NPCs, random encounters, so on and so forth. And of course everything has a randomized table when you roll the dice, which adds more into that. And awesome book. I've used this, I use it a lot, to be honest with you, and I love it. I really do love it. I highly recommend it. You know, even if you have one game system that you love to play and that's your game system, this would be a supplement to pick up with it to add to your gaming and to enhance your tabletop gaming. And this one, of course, is called The Classic Dungeon Design Guide. I highly recommend you guys look for this. And this is my opinion, but as a solo RPGer, this is a gold mine. It really is. It's, man, a very, very well thought out book. And that's my number 4. Let's talk about my number 3. My number 3 is, sometimes, for those of us, we, you know, with the modern game systems out there, and of course I mean the electronic gaming, mass media online gaming, and just video game platforms in general. Now, tabletop role-playing games have really had to step up their game, we'll say, so to speak, and we've seen this change in tabletop games where they become more and more rules heavy, more complicated, and more is added into it to be able to compete with online gaming. Well, for some of us, especially solo plays, sometimes that can slow things down, make things feel real clunky, and overall, as a solo enthusiast, it kind of makes you, how do I put this, feel overburdened by rules. So we want something simpler. We want something old school. We want to feel that old school renaissance of gaming when you had a handful of classes and monsters and dungeons and you just want to go dungeon delving and kick the door in, slay the goblins, and take the treasure. And that game system that really, really captures that and the essence of old school gaming would be the white box. And I love this game. I really do. I really do love this game. It's what it is. It's an old school revival. It's basically old basic Dungeons and Dragons is what it is. And it is so rules light. It is so simple to play. The book is laid out well. The art is awesome in it. Even when you thumb through it and you look at some of the old art in there, it really captivates your imagination. It takes you back to that time, back to the early days of gaming. And it is such a great book. It's an entire RPG unto itself in this book. I've seen this as low as $5, and I mean $5 for an RPG system. You think about that? Come on, it's a no-brainer. And the only thing you really need is a set of polyhedral dice to play it, which, if you're subscribed to my channel or watching this, I'm almost willing to bet you probably have more than one set. If you're like me, you're probably upwards to like, what, 15, 20 sets of them? But hey, who's counting, right? Alright, and that would be number 3. My number 2, and this was a book that was suggested to me by a couple of people, and I had picked it up, and I played through it, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I also found that the rules worked really well. If you enjoy miniatures and miniature skirmish, that the rule sets worked well for that too. And which, at that point, I purchased even more books for this system to take my characters to a higher level. And as a matter of fact, I read a few, I guess you would call it blogs, on people that use this game system with pre-generated adventure modules out there. So I decided to try it and do a live stream with Ravenloft, which I had a lot of fun with, and I was surprised how well it worked out. And this system is a really good system, particularly if you're new into RPG, right? And you don't know where to start. And a lot of people will want to gravitate towards D&D 5th edition because it's the latest and greatest. It's out in publication. The problem is, if you're not sure whether you're going to like tabletop gaming or not, that's a lot of money to invest into a game to find out you may not like it. Whereas if this game is a very small investment, you get a very large payoff from it, a lot of replayability. That game is 4 Against Darkness. Now, 4 Against Darkness is like any other RPG. It just all depends on what you put into it. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get back out of it. So they give you the, how do I put this, overview of how their game works. Character creation is simple, it's very rules light, and it leaves it up to you to add the rest and make the game what you want out of it. And of course, as you go up in levels and you advance through their other books, at that point they start incorporating more polyhedral dice. But the original game right here, you only need 2 6-sided dice to play it. So you could buy this book, and I think average price is about $12, but I've seen it as low as around $5, $6. And you can always rob the dice out of your Monopoly set, and you could be on your way to adventure. And that's going to be my number 2. My number 1 for tabletop RPGs, and this is a game system, and I had the book on my shelf for a while. A couple years back I had bought this big lot of RPG books, and it was in there. One of those things I never really did much with. And as I was going back through my books and all the stuff that I had, thinking of some things for video ideas, I decided to pull this game system out and play it. And to my surprise, I had fun. I fell in love with the system immediately. And I had done some research on it and found out there was other editions of it. And as a matter of fact, the early edition, the second edition, everybody said was the best edition by far ever put out. So I said, Artichoke, we have to find this out for ourselves. So at that point, I picked up Ruin Quest. And I will tell you what, by far this has become one of my favorite tabletop RPG games, overshadowing D&D, Palladium. And the unique difference about this game is most fantasy RPG games are based on the premise of you are a hero in a fantasy world, and at that point you're going on endless quests to delve through dungeons, kick doors in, and loot treasure to, at that point, gain levels and money and wealth. Ruin Quest is a different approach. Not only is the battle matrix in here different than most RPG systems out there, but the overall story. You're a character in a world that's surrounded by magic of ancient gods who at that point have passed down and imbued power into ruins. And of course you have a hierarchy that govern ruins, ruin lords, and by joining cults you learn more about the mysteries of the ruins and are able to at that point achieve higher magics and knowledge of the ruins. But you have to be careful, because turning your back on a ruin lord or a cult could bring the wrath of the god down upon your character. That is really cool. Meanwhile, all this is going on, you also have this vast sprawling world around your character of dangerous wilderness, ancient ruins, dungeons, and towns everywhere that your character at that point would encounter and react with. I have to say, this is an awesome system. Blew my socks off, man, and I love it. It's my to-go tabletop RPG now. I could sit here and do, and I have done a video on Ruin Quest. I could sit here and talk about this all day, but I'm not. But I'm just going to say, if you're looking for a fantasy RPG system to breathe a breath of fresh air into your gaming, and at that point immerse yourself into another world, to where rather than RPGing in a world you know that there's gods there, but in a world to where the gods dictate the ruins and the happenings, and they are tightly interwoven into the very fabrics of the reality of your characters. This is a game system for you to check out, and that is Ruin Quest 2nd Edition. Now, the cool thing about Ruin Quest is there are two publishers. This is the original, Chasm, and Mongoose Publishing also publishes Ruin Quest. Both systems are completely compatible, so you could pick up a lot of supplements cheap from the Mongoose Publishing, which I think was like the 4th edition, that are compatible with this one, and at that point you can build yourself a pretty decent library pretty cheaply, and man, have hours and hours and years upon years of endless fun and quest with Ruin Quest, which is why it's my #1 tabletop RPG. Now, of course, like I said, these are my opinions. These are my opinions with my game table and my experiences with them. You guys may not agree with it. You guys may have a different #1, but that's okay. So, let's talk about board games. And in 2018, some of the solo board games that I have found that are really cool board games and also play kind of like a role-playing game, so they kind of quench that thirst of a role-playing game, but at that time you get the strategy of a board game. So my #5 is going to be Shadowscape. Shadowscape is a relatively inexpensive game. It is, of course, what I would call it's a deck building game essentially, and you get a deck of cards to which you lay out a dungeon. You pick your character, then at that point you venture through the dungeon trying to defeat the enemies in or encounters inside the dungeon while trying to, at that point, level up your character and survive the entire thing. Basically, a classic dungeon crawl, but the nice thing is, this is set up to be played with 1 to 4 players, and it's very easily played solo, for the fact that all of the enemy tokens are controlled by the game's AI and move independently to where, when it comes to their turn, they automatically move around the board. And it's left up to you to be able to decide how you want to encounter them and take these things down. Now, the game has a lot of replayability to it, and it's an okay game. When I first got it, I played this a lot, and I've had other board games that have, how do I put this, really drawn my imagination, and this is one of them that I have not played with in late 2018, but in early 2018 when I first got it, I played a lot of it, and that is Shadowscape. So if you're looking for a relatively cheap board game with some strategy that plays like an RPG, that can be played solo right out of the box, that's going to be the one right there. That's my number 5. Let's talk about my number 4 solo board game. And my number 4, it's not medieval fantasy, which this takes place in an apocalyptic wasteland of Walking Dead. Now the game is, you play completely solitaire, or you can play with a group of people, and at that point it is what they would call a trying to remember what they call that system. They call it cooperative. It's a cooperative game system. And of course I'm talking about this one right here, Zombicide. So Zombicide is a game that has a lot of replayability to it. You get a lot of terrain tiles that you set up to create a city scape, and at that point you choose and take on the persona of one of the many survivors. And then as you try to achieve your objectives and fight off the onslaught of zombies that keep reappearing every turn, you're also trying to search for weapons to be able to better arm your survivor to give them a better chance at surviving the zombie apocalypse and to escape the board to win. Now, there's a lot of strategy that does go into Zombicide and a lot of thinking when you look at it, but it's also, in my opinion, it's a little too drawn out. I personally think that the game, the way they set it up, could move a little bit quicker than it does, but to each their own. I enjoy it. I like Zombicide, but it's one of those, if I had my choice of something other than Zombicide, I would go to that. Which is why that comes in my number 4 of 2018 of my top 5. So let's get into the number 3. So number 3 of 2018 will be Ruinbound. Now, Ruinbound, the main set that I have here, of course, when you pick this up, it's designed to be played with 2 to 4 players. And some alterations can be made to make it play solo. But they made an expansion called Unbreakable Bounds, which I highly recommend if you want to get into Ruinbound, that you pick up the expansion too and you use that, because that ironed out all the kinks and made it a completely 100% solo game that I love. And Ruinbound is like a quagmire for me. I set it up and I can play it, and I can sit and I can keep playing game after game after game until I have to force myself and say, okay, it's time to move on to something else. Now, this is a very immersive game. It feels like a role-playing game in the fact that your character has a lot of options that they can take on their turn, whether it be traveling, questing, combat. and so on and so forth through the mini quest. While this is going on, there is a time tracker that's constantly ticking forward in the background. So essentially, you're in a race against the clock to be able to, at that point, finish quests, gain gold at that point, and become more of a powerful character through achieving quests and equipment to be able to confront the main villain of the game. Now, of course, as the scenario plays out, as you get to the second side of the time counter in the game and your time counter starts moving down, the main villain spawns in the board, and then you're only left with a few turns to confront and kill the main encounter, or the main encounter kills you. At that point, you lose the game. So it is a very unique game in the fact that you constantly have a time marker that's running in the background, and you're confronted with a lot of decisions because every turn seems like a new quest, traveling over here to get this, to get that, and you're just inundated with all these different options, but you can only choose one at a time. And you hope when you choose it, you're making the right decision, because that time counter is always constantly clicking forward, forward, forward. And that is Ruinbound. And that's why that is my number 3 for 2018. Take me a sip of coffee here. So let's go into my number 2 for 2018 top solo board game that plays like an RPG game. And that would be Fallout. So Fallout takes place in a post-apocalyptic nuclear war world. If our world was to go through nuclear oblivion and the survivors were to emerge, what they would encounter. So, in the background, there are two factions that are constantly battling against one another. And as your character moves across the map, and at that point, going through ruins to find treasure and other items that they can find useful, and visiting towns, at this point, they are confronted with, as we'll put it, cards that represent different areas of the story, and depending on how you react to those, ultimately at that point affects the story and will sway you towards one side of the faction or the other. And if that's not enough to deal with, you also have a lot of encounters spawning on the board from mutants and bounty hunters and other things that are looking to take you out of this world. So you also have that to deal with as well, and it is overall an awesome, awesome system. It has a lot of replayability to it, and it is just, it's an awesome game. The way they designed it, they laid it out, you know, true to the video game of Fallout. When you play this game, you really feel as if you're in the game itself. And oh man, so I got an expansion coming for this, and I plan on doing another video once I get the California expansion for this. That's how much I love this game. Awesome, awesome game. And it's another one, guys, you take this sucker right out of the box, put it on your table and play it, and it's for a solitaire player. Alright, that's why that's my number 2 of 2018. So let's get to my number 1 of 2018 solitaire board game that plays like an RPG. And that's going to be Massive Darkness. So if you're not familiar with Massive Darkness, like Zombicide, comes with these terrain tiles that are reversible, and you have a large freedom to create the dungeon the way that you see fit, or you can use their pre-generated quest that comes with the book. You also get like 78 miniatures that come with this game system, along with tokens and cards and so on and so forth. But the unique thing about this board game, unlike most board games, this has the feel of an old school RPG in a board game, which is awesome because you have the ability at that point to not only choose your character background, but what class character you want to play. And then as you progress through the game, you keep track of a character sheet, and using your experience points, you buy more skills at that point to really detail the character the way you want it to be, just like an RPG system. On top of that, as you go through the dungeon, you find all kinds of treasure. As you collect this treasure, you get obviously better weapons, better armor, enchantments, potions, so on and so forth. Everything you would find in an old school role-playing game is presented here. The cool thing about it is, as you go through the dungeon and you open up doors, you draw a door card. The door card will at that point tell you how to set the room up. As so, because I already have this game set up that I'm currently in the middle of a quest of. Now, where that makes it so cool in the replayability is you could play the same map twice, but have a different outcome every single time. And besides the highly detailed miniatures you get with it, I mean, some of these miniatures are just, check that out. That's just one of the roaming monsters that come in this set, and it is awesome. This is just an overall awesome game system. I really do enjoy it. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and can't say enough about it, guys. My number one, I mean, I have to admit, Simon did a great job at making a board game that plays like an RPG game and capturing that feeling of an old school RPG game and incorporating into it. Now, you have two ways that you can play this game. You can play it like a board game, and so where at that point, as you go through defeating encounters, you're going to gain experience relatively quickly, and at that point, not only level up very quickly, but acquire your skills quickly too. Or the way I like to play it, which is using it in what they call story mode or campaign mode, to where you gain experience much slower, but at that point you get to retain all your weapons in between dungeon maps and trade at the local shops, and you really have to work towards leveling your character up and acquiring those new skills. And when you get those new skills, you really appreciate them because you had to wipe out quite a few encounters in order to get that skill, that you're just kind of like, yeah, I can't wait till the next encounter comes because I'm just gonna and that's the best thing about the game system and why I love it. And while it's my number one for 2018 for the best solo experience with a board game, and it truly is, guys. You get that sucker, you open up the box, and you sit down, and it's single player right off the get-go. Or you can play upwards to 5 other people with it cooperatively, even though it's made by the same manufacturer that makes Zombicide. Don't think this is like Zombicide. These are just completely worlds apart from one another. And I have to say, I absolutely 100% love this game. It has a lot of replayability to it and very high quality miniatures. If I didn't have that, you know, if it wasn't that the game was so great and drew you in, then the miniatures alone are worth it. And let me just show you real quick as to what I'm talking about. Let me move some of my stuff here. So, not only do you, now mind you, I have 3 other tiles on the board right now that I'm using, so I don't want to uproot those and uproot all my progress, but you get these big stacks of tiles that are reversible that come with it. you get, obviously, I'm not going to go into all the cards, but you get cards that represent each level. The highest level you can achieve in the game is level 5, but considering each dungeon encounter you play takes 2 to 3 hours, and there are 10 pre-made quests that they give you, and it's up to you to create even more quests after that, and they have expansions, and anyways, a lot of replayability. You get these great, highly detailed miniatures to go with this game system. You get, here are the roaming monsters in the dungeon. And then of course you go into the bosses of the dungeon encounters. And then of course you got your heroes here that are the brown miniatures and your dashboards. And if that's not enough, those are just your roaming monsters and your bosses. You also get all the minions which go with your dungeon as well. So as you can see, you get a lot of miniatures here, which this game system is really cool because if you think about it, you could play it as a standalone system, and if you get bored with the system, it can be doubled out to be used in your own RPG games. Setting up your own dungeon, you have miniatures, you got terrain tiles, you got everything you need. You just pull it out, throw it down there. You can also double it out and use the system as the way it is, and use it with your own RPG, because the fact that you have a character sheet that sticks with your character, and at this point you can keep track and keep advancing and leveling up your character. And it really, really is a cool game system. I have to admit that. That's why it is my #1 for solo board game that plays like an RPG. And I really, really love it. And I highly recommend it. If you're thinking about, should I get Massive Darkness or shouldn't I? Should I or shouldn't I? My personal opinion is, yeah, you probably should, because you're not going to regret it. Every aspect of it, you're going to find something that you're absolutely going to love about it. Whether it's the detailed miniatures, whether it's the terrain tiles, the game itself, whatever. If you enjoy tabletop gaming, there will be one aspect of this game that you're going to find that you're absolutely going to fall in love with. And I will leave it at that. So, with that being said, guys, those are my top 5 of RPG and board game of 2018. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you guys got something out of this. You know, and as I said, these are my personal opinions, and these, because this is, you know, game systems I played, so I really like these. With that being said, I just want to say to all you subscribers and you that have been with me from the beginning, all of you guys that have recently subscribed, from the bottom of my heart, guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All your great comments, all of the suggestions that you give me for games that I have tried out that have opened up my eyes to more than just the realm of D&D, basically, and the other things that are out there, and great game systems. Thank you guys so much. It's really what drives me forward and makes me want to make more videos, and wants me to share my love of tabletop gaming and letting my imagination cut loose with the rest of the world and with you guys out there. And thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. I wish you guys all a very, very Merry Christmas, a very, very great and happy New Year. I hope 2019 is a great year for everybody out there. And I think with this I'm going to end the video and move on to my Massive Darkness here and finish this up. Because, yeah, I think it's come time. So if you like my video, guys, press the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, please press the subscription button, click the little bell icon, and you'll be notified when I upload a new video. Alright guys, I'll talk to you later. Artichoke dip out.